In November 1987, a young couple's innocent road trip spiraled into a nightmare as they disappeared without a trace, leaving their families shattered and desperate for answers. As police uncovered chilling clues, relatives began receiving haunting letters that hinted at a sinister fate, and the case slipped into the shadows of time. For decades, the truth remained buried beneath layers of mystery and grief. But just when it seemed that justice would never be served, a revolutionary forensic breakthrough reignited the investigation, revealing a shocking connection that would unveil the horrifying reality of what happened that fateful night. Tanya van Cuylenborg, born on March 7, 1969, in Victoria, Canada, grew up in a close-knit family with her loving parents and an older brother, to whom she was particularly close. From a young age, Tanya had a strong affection for animals and dreamed of one day becoming a veterinarian. Her adventurous spirit also led to a passion for travel. A memorable high school trip to Paris with her best friend fueled her desire to explore the world even further. At 18, just before finishing high school, Tanya met Jay Cook, who was 2 years older and had already graduated. They were introduced through a mutual friend and quickly began dating. Although Tanya had aspirations of becoming a veterinarian, she chose to delay college to pursue her love for travel. To save money for her future adventures, she took jobs at a cafe and as a dog walker. Jay also decided not to attend college right away, opting to work with his father in their family heating installation business. In November 1987, Jay Cook's father needed a part for their business, but local suppliers didn't have it in stock. The closest option was in Seattle, Washington. Rather than wait for delivery, Jay's father decided to get it himself, but his packed schedule made that impossible. He asked Jay to make the trip for him, and Jay agreed, eager to help. Excited by the opportunity, Jay invited Tanya, knowing she'd enjoy the trip. They had been dating for 6 months, but Jay hoped this trip would strengthen their relationship. As expected, Tanya was thrilled and agreed immediately. They planned to leave Victoria in the morning, reach Seattle by evening, and return the next day. Jay's father lent him the van and gave him money for a hotel, but Jay and Tanya decided to save that by sleeping in the van instead. He also provided a $700 check for the part and some extra cash for expenses. Despite Seattle being fairly close to Victoria, the trip required 2 ferry rides, one to enter the US and another to cross the bay near Seattle. On the morning of November 18th, they set off in the van to catch the first ferry to Port Angeles. Their families expected them to be back by the next afternoon. Tanya and Jay never made it back home, and their families grew anxious right away, knowing the ferry schedule and realizing they should have returned by then. Initially, they thought the couple might have taken some extra time to enjoy the scenic route, causing them to miss the ferry. But as hours passed with no word, Tanya's parents contacted Jay's family, and by afternoon, both sets of parents were seriously worried. Though they still held on to hope that the couple had simply extended their trip, the concern deepened when they didn't return that evening. The following morning, their families went to the police to file missing persons reports. However, the police weren't alarmed, citing that Tanya, 18, and Jay, 20, were adults, and without any signs of harm, they likely just took an impromptu trip. They advised the parents to wait a few more days before taking further action. Tanya and Jay's parents were understandably frustrated with the police's response, convinced their children wouldn't have extended their trip without letting anyone know. Jay had a crucial job for his father's business and had never acted so irresponsibly. If they had decided to explore longer, they would have called home from one of the many payphones along their route. Determined to find them, Tanya's father took the initiative to begin the search himself. He and Jay's parents quickly learned that the couple never picked up the part in Seattle, as the supplier had waited for hours without seeing them. Next, Tanya's father drove along the route to Seattle, but there was no sign of either Tanya or Jay, nor their van. Refusing to give up, he contacted a private company and rented a helicopter to survey the area from the sky. Unfortunately, this effort was also in vain, as the dense forests obscured any chance of spotting them from the air. Tanya's father took action by creating flyers about their disappearance and heading to Seattle to post them around the city. This effort continued for several days as the families of the missing couple worked tirelessly to find them. Eventually, the local police began to take the case more seriously, but they still believed Tanya and Jay were just spending time together and would return home eventually. As a result, the police contacted their colleagues in Seattle, sharing descriptions of the van and details about Tanya and Jay, requesting that they be alerted if anyone saw them. On November 24th, just 5 days after Tanya and Jay vanished, a man walking in the woods about 90 miles north of Seattle stumbled upon a body under a tree. Upon investigation, authorities found a young woman with partially missing clothing, bound hands, and a gunshot wound to the head. It appeared she had been killed elsewhere, as there was little blood at the scene. Lacking identification, police matched her description to Tanya from missing persons reports. Her father confirmed her identity at the morgue. As detectives launched their investigation, they focused on the circumstances of Tanya's death, especially since Jay was still missing, raising suspicions about his involvement. Jay's family strongly maintained that he could not be involved in Tanya's death, citing his gentle nature and lack of aggression. They also noted he didn't own a firearm, making it difficult for him to acquire one. While searching for Jay, police received a tip from a bartender about 18 miles from where Tanya's body was found. The bartender had discovered a wallet and keys outside, containing Tanya's ID. After seeing a news report on her murder, he called 911. Detectives investigated the area and found plastic zip ties similar to those used to bind Tanya's hands, rubber gloves, and a half-empty box of bullets. They also spotted a van nearby, confirming it was the same one that Tanya and Jay had taken on their trip. The inside of the van was in disarray, with items thrown about and damaged. Despite the chaos, investigators found vital clues, including several receipts that helped trace Tanya and Jay's route, as well as a ferry ticket confirming they had reached Seattle. This evidence indicated that something tragic had occurred there. Notably, Tanya's camera was missing from the van and had not been found near her body, suggesting the killer may have taken it. The van's interior was also covered in blood, prompting forensic experts to collect samples for laboratory analysis, hoping this evidence would lead to a breakthrough in the case. At the time, DNA analysis was emerging in criminology and had already helped solve several cases. In Seattle, the lab identified 3 blood samples, those of Tanya and Jay, along with an unidentified man's. Without a DNA database, they couldn't identify the 3rd sample. Detectives ruled out Jay as a suspect, shifting their focus to critical questions. Was he still alive, and where was he? The answer came swiftly. On November 26th, hunters near a bridge outside Seattle discovered a body in the bushes, later identified as Jay Cook. His death was attributed to strangulation, and numerous bruises suggested a violent struggle. Detectives theorized that Jay was killed first. Then Tanya was transported in the van toward the Canadian border, where she was murdered and her body discarded. Traces of semen found on Tanya linked back to the same unidentified man whose blood had been found in the van. Investigators pieced together Tanya and Jay's route using receipts from the van. After taking the ferry from Victoria to Port Angeles, they stopped for food before heading toward Seattle. Jay missed a shortcut, as noted by a local store receipt. The clerk recalled seeing a couple fitting their description asking for directions, along with a man in a brown raincoat who seemed to be following them. Another receipt indicated they stopped in Allen before reaching the Seattle ferry, where witnesses confirmed seeing them. However, their movements became unclear after that, complicating the investigation. After Tanya and Jay's murders, their families received disturbing letters from someone claiming to be the killer, taunting them and bragging about evading capture. Investigators struggled to trace the letters, which came from various locations, adding to the family's pain. especially during holidays. Authorities were wary, knowing that such letters often turn out to be hoaxes. The case of Tanya and Jay's murders faced a prolonged stagnation, with detectives exploring various suspects and even considering the possibility of a serial killer. Over the years, several serial killers were apprehended in the area, but none were connected to this case. In 2003, the investigation was reopened, and the killer's DNA was submitted to the FBI database, yet no matches were found. Detectives believed the killer had a significant criminal history, but had evaded capture due to the lack of DNA sampling at the time. In 2010, a national TV show on the case generated new leads, including a tip about a 78-year-old man from Seattle. His travel patterns matched the locations of letters sent to the victims' families, but he was ultimately found to have no connection to the murders. The case remained cold for several years, until 2018 when detectives turned to Parabon, a company specializing in creating composite sketches from DNA samples. They produced images of the suspected killer at various ages, but these efforts yielded no leads. Undeterred, investigators then employed genetic genealogy, uploading the killer's DNA to public databases. They identified a potential second cousin and traced her family tree, looking for a man in the Seattle area who fit the profile from 1987. This investigation led them to a 55-year-old suspect named William Talbot. William Talbot, a truck driver from a Seattle suburb, became the main suspect in the Tanya and Jay murder case. After police conducted surveillance, they obtained a coffee cup he discarded, which provided DNA that matched the killer's profile. In May 2018, 30 years after the murders, Talbot was arrested, denying any involvement. During his 2019 trial, the defense argued that the DNA could have come from consensual encounters and pointed out the absence of direct evidence connecting him to Jay's death. However, the prosecution countered with strong evidence, including fingerprints from Jay's van matching Talbot's and a witness seeing a brown van near his home in 1987. His proximity to where Jay's body was found suggested he knew the area well. The prosecution theorized that Talbot lured Tanya and Jay under false pretenses, killed them in a remote location, and then evaded capture for 30 years. Despite not having a confession, the evidence led to his conviction in June 2019, resulting in 2 life sentences without parole. After the conviction, Talbot's lawyers claimed jury bias, leading to a retrial in 2021, but a higher court upheld the original conviction in 2022. Although he had a history of minor offenses, Talbot had never been charged with murder. Investigators believe he may be linked to other unsolved cases, given the calculated nature of the crimes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please press the like button. Thank you for watching.